Welcome to my spring to summer flower bed transition. Here, right at the gate, you can see some violas are still in bloom. These are zinnias I started from seed. Here they are a couple of weeks later, some of them in bloom. And I did have these last year as well, and I love them. And here is a volunteer sunflower. Can't wait for it to bloom. This is what it looked like in the spring with some daffodils in bloom. You can see more violas and pansies. Come on in. Here's my dog waiting to play with you. On this side, I have some of the same plants. So in the background are mums, which I usually trim right up until July. And then we have violets. They're not in bloom now, of course. And they dislike the heat very much. This here is a celosia, which I pinched, and I did the same thing with these cosmos, hoping they would bloom a little better. This area looked a little sad, so I transplanted some of my other celosia that volunteered elsewhere, and you can see how poor that violet plant looks. But they are a perennial, so they'll feel better in the fall. See how gorgeous that celosia is. In this swoop, I planted some purple petunias that I bought at a store, so they bring a pop of color. And in this little container, I have a couple of verbena varieties. They were at a different location, but under an attack of aphids. So I put them in this bed because now they are located right under a salt cedar tree, which has a lot of ladybugs and ladybug larvae in it. So hopefully they take care of the problem for me. Here I have some ice plant. More cosmos. This here is a marguerite daisy, which I love. I hope it gets bulkier. And a poor little primrose that is being eaten alive by everything. There are some alliums that I need to pull out. And this gorgeous ice plant along the cypress tree and the yew trees that are huge. So right here on the left, you can see this salt cedar tree. This is what it looked like in spring. I love when it's in bloom. And then just look at the detail. These tiny little flowers. So in spring again, I had some pansies and daffodils, some tulips. Just a lot of color. I love these types of two-tone tulips. Unfortunately, they are hybrids, so they do not come back reliably. This is the first year I've had these fringed tulips. Aren't they just so interesting? Look at the texture here. This was just a little bit later in the season. You see some primrose in bloom. This is after I deadheaded the tulips. The alliums were in bloom. I love how full it looked here. Just gorgeous. Please enjoy a different view of this spring flower bed. And this is my lawn, which has a lot of native grasses, including dandelions. So this is now fast forward to early summer. Here I have some raspberry plants. This one in the back is the early variety. See if we can find a raspberry or two. There it is. And a lot of damage to the leaves due to all the insects. I don't tend to use chemicals much, so it's a free-for-all here. And here I planted some Vinca just because I had them. It took me forever to grow them. So they're kind of behind, and then I just needed a spot to tuck them in. Look how gorgeous this ice plant looks. Isn't that beautiful? And in spring, I did have, in the spot where now I have Vinca, I did have these beautiful snapdragons. They actually overwintered in this area, and I trimmed them quite a ways down in the spring. And they were gorgeous, but they did have scale. I just had to take them out. Alright, here you can see the state of my grass. It's been an exceptionally dry year. And this little flower bed still has some pansies. You can see the taller plants are sweet peas. And I did also plant some petunias that are taking an awfully long time to bulk up. And this is the clematis. I left some of the seed heads because they're so pretty. And then there's the pea pod. So cute. Some of the pansies died back. And this is what it looked like with all the pansies around it and the clematis in bloom. Isn't that just stunning? I had so many blooms. This is the second year for this clematis. actually have two varieties, and there's a dark purple one, which I think I had 3 blooms this year. This is what it looks like now, where I pulled all the pansies because they were just struggling with the heat. A few surviving peas here. And then down below, a little struggling petunia, a vinca or 2. And then here I planted a vining plant. I think it's a black-eyed Susan. And it's growing ever so slowly. So this flower bed has been kind of struggling in summer, so I finally added this drip system, so hopefully the plants finally take off. And this is the rest of my evergreen alley. You can see these trees are all planted at different times just because they weren't doing so well, so many of them had to be replaced. And you can see there are more flowers that I can tell you about, so that'll be part of another tour. Thank you for joining me on this transition tour where my flower beds went from lush and full in spring to sparse and hopeful in summer.